a look at global human resource management. Many companies have operations in foreign countries. Therefore, human resource management truly takes place on an international scale. There are HR issues that organizations must address in a world of global competition. The global nature of business is affecting human resource management in modern organizations. Global differences among countries affect an organization's decisions about HR, including planning, selection, and compensation. There's also best practices for managing employees set on international assignment. Most organizations function in the global economy, meaning HR departments are serving an international workforce. Organizations that operate globally are very likely to employ citizens of more than one country, so they need to understand the laws and customs that apply to employees in those countries. They may have to prepare managers and other personnel to take international assignments. They have to adapt their human resource plans and policies to different settings and communicate them to its international workforce. Most organizations begin by serving customers with a domestic marketplace. The business must recruit, train, hire, and compensate employees, and these people usually come from the business owner's local labor market. As organizations grow, they often begin to meet demand for customers in other countries, and eventually it may become economically desirable to set up operations in foreign countries. They need to hire managers who can function in a variety of settings, give them the necessary training, and provide compensation systems that take into account the different pay rates, tax systems, and cost of living from one country to another. At the highest level of involvement in the global marketplace are global organizations. This type of organization needs HR practices that encourage flexibility and are based on an in-depth knowledge of differences among countries. A global organization needs a transnational human resource management system that features decision-making from a global perspective, managers from many countries, and ideas contributed by people from a variety of cultures. Global organizations must be able to recruit, develop, retain, and use managers who can get results across national boundaries. Decisions must balance uniformly, for fairness, with flexibility to account for cultural and legal differences. This balance and the variety of perspectives should work together to improve the quality of decision-making. Organizations that operate in more than one country must recognize that other countries differ in terms of many factors. By far, the most important influence on international HRM is the culture of the country in which the facility is located. Culture is a community set of shared assumptions about how the world works and what ideas are worth striving for. In other words, culture is simply how we do things around here. Culture can have a great effect on a country's laws because laws are often based on the culture's definitions of right and wrong. Culture also influences what people value, so it affects people's economic systems and efforts to invest in education. Finally, cultural differences can affect how people communicate and how they coordinate their activities. In collectivist cultures, people tend to value group decision-making, as an example. Because of these challenges, organizations must prepare managers to recognize and handle cultural differences. They must recruit managers with knowledge for other countries who can adapt to new environments. A country's economic system, as well as the government's involvement in the economy through taxes or compensation, price controls, and other activities, influences human resource management practices in a number of ways. As with all aspects of a region's or country's life, the economic system and the culture are likely to be closely tied, providing many of the incentives or disincentives for developing the value of the labor force. A country's political legal system, its government, laws, and regulations strongly impinges on human resource management. The country's laws often dictate the requirements for training, compensation, hiring, firing, and layoffs. Planning involves decisions about where and how many employees are needed for each international facility. Decisions about where to locate include HR considerations such as the cost and availability of qualified workers. Many companies have boosted efficiency by outsourcing, arranging to have specific functions performed by outside contractors. Many of those arrangements involve workers outside the United States in lower wage countries. Compared with other countries, the United States allows employers with latitude in reducing their workforce. giving U.S. employers the option of hiring for peak needs, then laying employees off if needs decline. Other governments place more emphasis on protecting workers' jobs. Training for and transporting families to foreign assignments is more expensive than hiring people in the foreign country. Sometimes a person's technical and human relations skills outweigh the advantages of hiring locally. In other situations, the labor market simply does not offer enough qualified people. Here are some criteria. Competency in the employee's expertise, ability to communicate verbally and non-verbally, flexibility and sensitively responding to cultural differences, motivation to succeed, and a willingness to learn about the foreign country. In research conducted a number of years ago, the factor most strongly influencing whether an employee completed a foreign assignment was the comfort of the employee's spouse and family. Personality may also be important. Research has found that the employees who are most likely to successfully complete their overseas assignments are extroverted, agreeable, and conscientious. Culture shock, disillusionment, and discomfort occur during the process of adjusting to a new culture. Training and development can be a challenge in an organization whose employees come from multiple countries. Developers of effective training programs for an international workforce must ask certain questions. The first is to establish the objectives for training and its content. Decisions about the training should support those objectives. The developers should also ask what training techniques, strategies, and media to use. Some training techniques will be more effective than others, depending on the learner's language and culture, as well as the content of the training. The plan for the training program must consider international differences among trainees. For example, economic and educational differences might influence employees across to and the ability to use web-based training. Cultural differences may influence whether they'll consider it appropriate to ask questions and whether they expect a trainer to spend time becoming acquainted with employees or to get down to business immediately. When an organization selects an employee for a position in a foreign country, it must prepare the employee for assignment. This kind of training is called cross-cultural preparation, preparing employees to work cross-national and cultural boundaries, and often includes family members who will accompany the employee on assignment. Cross-cultural preparation is important. Research links it to lower turnover among expatriates, greater willingness to accept another overseas assignment, and greater perceived contribution to business outcomes. It's important for employers to remember that returning home is also a challenge when employees have been away for months or years. They typically need time, at least a few days, to readjust to the culture they left behind. Furthermore, for the employee and their organizations to get maximum value for overseas assignment, the returning employees should have opportunities to share what they've learned. At global organizations, international assignments are part of many career paths. Decisions about pay structure, incentive pay, and employee benefits become more complex with an international workforce. Market pay structures can differ substantially across countries in terms of both pay level and relative worth of jobs. Differences such as whether pay levels should reflect what workers are used to in their own countries or the earnings of colleagues in company headquarters create a dilemma for global companies. Dilemmas such as these make a global compensation strategy important as a way to show employees that the structure is designed to be fair and related to the value that employees bring to the organization. An average hourly labor cost in industrialized countries such as Switzerland, Norway, and the United States are far higher than those costs in newly industrialized countries like Turkey, Mexico, and the Philippines. However, merely comparing wages ignores differences in education, skills, and productivity. If an organization gets more or higher quality output from a higher wage workforce, the higher wages may be worth the cost. Cultural and legal differences can also affect pay structure. An example of cultural impact on pay would be a culture's widespread practice of paying holiday bonuses. Besides setting a pay structure, the organization must make decisions with regard to incentive pay, such as bonuses and stock options. As in the United States, compensation packages in other countries include benefits. Companies that operate across national boundaries often need to work with unions in more than one country. At least in comparison with European organizations, U.S. organizations exert more centralized control over labor relations in various countries where they operate. U.S. management, therefore, must recognize differences in how various cultures understand and regulate labor relations. Legal differences range from who may form a union to how much latitude an organization is allowed in laying off workers. In some situations, governments get involved to protect workers. International labor relations must also take into account the negotiations between labor and management that take place in different social and cultural contexts, not just different economic and legal ones. Negotiators will approach the process differently depending on whether the culture views the process as primarily cooperative or competitive, and whether it's local practice to negotiate by starting with specifics or overall principles. Working with host country nationals can help organizations navigate such differences in negotiation style. At some point, most international and global organizations assign managers to foreign posts. The challenge of managing expatriate managers begins with determining which individuals in the organization are most compatible or capable of handling an assignment in another country. Depending on the nature of the assignment and the culture where it's located, the organization should consider each candidate's skills, learning style, and approach to problem solving. Some of the most important factors for expatriate adjustment are the work environment, ability to communicate in the host country's language, job characteristics, work-life balance, and contact with those in the country left behind. To assess candidates' ability to adapt to a new environment, interviews should address topics such as these. The interviewer should be certain to give candidates a clear and complete preview of the assignment and the host country culture. Employees selected for expatriate assignments already have job-related skills, so preparation for expatriate assignments often focuses on cross-cultural training, that is, training in what to expect from the host country's culture. Paradoxically, this requires developing a greater awareness of one's own culture so that the expatriate management can recognize differences and similarities between the cultures and perhaps home culture bias. Performance management of expatriates requires clear goals for overseas assignment and frequent evaluation of whether the expatriate employee is on track to meet those goals. Measures such as productivity should take into account any local factors that could make expected performance different in the host country than in the home country. As the expatriate assignment nears its end, the Human Resource Department should help the expatriate through repatriation, making the transition back to his or her home country. Re-entry is not as simple as it might sound. The experience has challenged the expatriate, and the companies in the expatriate's home culture have changed as well.